I haven't done this in over 15 years, so it's all good. You know, if your heart's not in it, don't do it.
Yeah.
And my heart wasn't into it. I mean, it was into making the work, but it wasn't into all the stuff, the trappings that went along with it. And that was part of the reason why I just sort of receded from the whole thing. And now I get to look back, and it's fun for me because it was a different life.
Right.
I mean, I look at the work like somebody else made it because it's been so long, and now I do completely different things.
Yeah.
But it's sure great to have that.
And you have to meet this man. He is the architect. He designed.
Oh, fantastic. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Well, it's so wonderful to see you. I haven't had a chance to absorb the whole building yet because I only been over there a year.
We've got a challenge.
And I really could have a lot of things I could say, but I would like to address anything specifically that someone might have in the way of a question about the work or any other part of the process or anything. Get me started.
Let me ask you about the masks behind you.
Sure.
The source.
Well,
What are you thinking?
Well, the early inspirations, of course, were from the Northwest Indian carvings and that sort of thing. And also at the time I was doing these masks, I was inspired by the Crow and Raven series and was fascinated by the whole tradition of the crows and ravens, and then through that got fascinated by the genealogy of the corvids and their intelligence, and then how they were used in so many different cultures. So it was a great way to explore that a little bit.
And is that piece sandblasted?
There's no sandblasting. The way these pieces are done is that we make what we call a blank, which is a small vessel that has a very small opening, and it is cooled in the annealer, and it has layers of color on it. Well, when we cool that, we can actually, the gentleman who did the carving on this is here. You'll notice by his size, he's the largest guy in the museum. Rick Allen. Rick and I worked together for decades, and he would carve out the color, and then we would put the vessel back in the oven, heat it up, and pick it back up under the blowpipe, then blow it and shape it. So the design then would follow the form that you would continue to shape. So that's why it gave it that feeling of belonging more to the shape than just being applied. That's one of the great qualities about the material.
How about the medicine jars? How do you do that?
The medicine jars, well, the medicine jars were spawned from some pieces that I found in Burma, up in the hills. They were like coconut shells and seeds that were hollowed out and used for the storage of herbs and medicines and that sort of thing. And the stoppers were usually traditional effigies of particular animals through some mythological identification from whatever ailment or spirit you might want to have possessed. So when I saw these, it inspired me as just a concept. You could apply that to anything that I had seen in any culture anywhere, and all the myths that surround every different types of animal, whether it be birds or fish or shells or bats or things you might see. So that was a real free-for-all, and of course the idea of all the techniques we could apply to that idea. We always chose a specific vehicle, which would be the series, whether it be medicine jars or drums or masks, and then it just became kind of a free-for-all of having an opportunity to, within that particular parameter of the theme, to work with all these different little vignettes, characters, different animals or materials that you were trying to be inspired by. You were going to ask.
Maybe if you elaborated even a little bit more on the creation cycle. I mean, I'm used to, like many people, seeing blown glass and used to seeing vessels and round objects. How do you transform? I mean, how many days is it that you work on a piece like one of these masks, just sort of defining that shape? It no longer feels to me like a blowpipe shape. I honestly don't understand how you
Well, a lot of the forms have been done over a period of several days. Like, for example, to do the mask, you'd have to know what you were going to do to make the blank ahead of time. So you would spend one day, working on that blank part, and then another day engraving and carving it, and then the next day picking it up, carving it, shaping it. But that might get stretched over a week because the cooling down and the heating up process takes longer than just a 12-hour period. Sometimes it would take a 24-hour period. So there's a lot of multitasking where you're working on several pieces at the same time, and you're trying to time it through the day, and we have what we call a garage or an oven, what goes in it, and has to get slowly heated, and annealer's cooling down. So there's a lot of juggling. So there's a lot of communication amongst the team about what's going to go on when and what gets ready, and a lot of people reminding me, oh, we're working on this, or we need to do that. And but what would happen is, as you work on one piece, you might see an aspect or an approach that would inspire something completely different. And then you might even sort of stop everything and say, well, we got to try this over here and get this started, and then we backtrack to where we were working. But there was a lot of inspiration that happened throughout the process because the material itself is so dynamic. And you just have to be open to that. You have to be really flexible with your schedule and what you get attached to. Because many of the pieces, you really wanted to turn out a certain way, and it didn't want to because of the way certain colors have certain characteristics. They're either hot or soft, and they might move in a way where they will not lend themselves to the form that you want. And so you have to go with these mistakes that happen and then just take a lot of credit for it.
And then on the other side, I mean, do you end up with a lot of tragedies, pieces that are in the process, you're happy with them and they just crack, they don't anneal right? Or
Yeah, you always have a certain amount of loss, a percentage, and certain pieces that we worked in had a higher success rate than others. But I can't tell you how many times you'd put a piece in the annealer and you'd think, oh, that's a really great piece. And you open up the annealer and it's a dog. And then there's pieces you put away and you just, oh, that's a dog, and you take it out and it's a really great piece. So there's that happens too, because first of all, you don't get to hold it still and get a good look at it. And the presentation on the end of a blowpipe is far different than it is when it's here in a museum or in relationship to other pieces as well. And then one of the biggest characteristics that I was really keen on was, as you're developing a new series, both technically and aesthetically, there's a naivety early on in the series that you cannot intentionally produce or duplicate. It's a time in this series where there's a simplicity about it, a primitiveness that I would always find really exciting about cultures and those aspects of the piece. And you try to make something primitive or a little bit naive, it is impossible. It has to be pure. And that would happen when we would go through a series and develop through its stage of development. It would be a moment in there which was, you couldn't captivate it. Yeah, it was very elusive.
Mama!
Could you talk about your team a little bit?
Yeah.
Who's doing what? How many people?
Well, these pieces are a real product of incredible teamwork. I work with people on my team anywhere from 10 to 30 years, and a number of them are here, and they're just fantastic people and artists in their own right, as you can see from the work in the other room. And though my approach with the team was, I learned a lot from working with Dale Chihuly. And what's really extraordinary is that you have people that are really talented and see things a certain way. And I have a saying, I don't care how good somebody's cooking is, sooner or later you're going to get sick of eating it. and I get really tired of my own cooking. And so when we would go in and I would see things a certain way, I would say to Ross, for example, I'd say, let's work on these, squirrels or hooks or whatever it may be in a particular way. And he'd be over there working, and I would see something that he would do, and I'd go, and he would do something I wouldn't do, and that would be really keen. And one thing that I learned from Dale is just because you didn't like something in your first impression didn't mean it was really good. And so many times I would see what some of these guys would do, and I would just bite my tongue, either that or I could say what I wanted to say because I paid them to listen. That if I knew that if I was patient with it enough, that all of a sudden a light might go on. And it'd be, you know what, that is really cool. And then we would head off in a completely different tangent that without their resource, I wouldn't be able to. So when we were working on this, real variety of different series, there's a lot of resource to pull from. It's amazing.
So do you usually start with an idea in mind, I'm going to make this?
Yeah, you have to have some starting
And
ground.
then sometimes it'll go somewhere else.
Completely left field.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we will hammer it out. But again, the nature of the material is such where it's so vassal and there's so many variations. I think, I said this in the video, like for example, making corn. There's 100 different ways to make corn. And every different way you make it is going to have a different impression and a different feeling. So just by the sheer fact of you using a different technique yields a different result that has a really different feeling to it. And we capitalized on that. Yeah.
I'm still curious how you make the shape.
A lot of pushing and pulling and coaxing and swearing. And
What do your tools look like?
The basic tools are tweezers and scissors. A lot of these shapes we work from the inside. So they would be kind of a long tool with a particular variation on the end, whether it be a bent rod or something not too pointy but a little bit, or a ball on the end. And we could go in and work from the outside to bring shapes like this out. And then you'd push in certain areas with certain tools to push back in. So you're always working it in and out to get that shape. We traveled to Italy 35, 40 years ago and watched the way these guys worked, and we had never seen anybody work from the inside before. And when we saw that, it changed sculpting of glass in the U.S. Yeah. Huh, Kelly, or Shelley? Yeah. Anyways, that's, yeah.
And where's your glass studio, and do you allow the public to come in and?
I don't blow glass anymore.
Yeah,
I stopped blowing glass a few years ago, and now I just work on other materials. But I worked at the Pilchuck Glass School. That's where my studio was. I never actually owned my own facility.
What materials are you working with now?
Stone and wood. Yeah. Yes.
Can you talk about how you got started?
In glass? Well, my mother was a painter, and so I was involved in being around the arts ever since I was Ren's age, this big. And so I painted and I drew, and then I had some extraordinary opportunities in school to work with some inspiring instructors in clay. And that was in going through school, and then especially in high school, I had a mentor there that really encouraged me to continue in the arts. And glass is a very natural extension from clay. It's like the entire process condensed immediately, and I was really taken by that. And I got a job at the Pilchuck Glass School as a truck driver when I was 19 years old. And part of my job was to pick up faculty. I picked up Dale at the airport.
Big start, big start.
Thank you.
The line work of the fish, and then we put it back in the oven and we pick it back up on the blow pie, and then we blow it to it's a little bit bigger, and then we lay the basket on the outside, and then we blow it even bigger, and that's what stretches it. And the consistency of the materials are different, where this is a stiffer material than this material. So it actually, that's why it looks like it kind of constricts. And then the top is added.
Wow.
Okay?
Wow. Okay.
So
It's kind of hard to explain. If you
Right.
saw it done, it's like when I'm telling you this stuff like
I'm
scrawls, etches, but if you saw it done, it'd make perfect sense. Yeah.
and so the net is actually expanded when you blow it?
Yeah, everything. Well, I actually lay the net on, by just laying wrap after wrap and then crisscrossing it, and then I blow it and expand
Blow it
it.
again, yeah.
And that's what, like I said, the consistency of the colors is different. So this is a stiffer color than this, so that's why it actually indents it.
Oh,
When
yeah.
it blows it out, you notice
Yeah.
that?
Mhm. Yeah, I
that's
see
what I
that.
said, it bulges. So we understand this after doing this for a long time.
Okay. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, that's all I want to do is go watch myself.
Well, but there are people.
Octopus I consider to be one of the most intelligent creatures in the sea, and we actually hunt them in Hawaii. And part of the process in hunting them, of course, is locating them, finding them, and then dispatching them and killing them in a certain way. And a lot of people don't realize this, but the way an octopus is killed is you dive down, you negotiate him out of his lair, cave, and then as you're swimming to the surface, keep the tentacles moving so they don't grab on. You slide your hand across the head, you bring the eyes to the front, put the eyes in your mouth, and then bite down behind the eyes, crushing the skull, which kills the octopus immediately. Now, this is something that we do, and it sounds a little harsh, but it's something that is more humane and also almost a passage for the animal, which we use for food and as a lure for other animals.
Instantaneous, yeah.
Okay?
Very good. Okay, thank
A
you.
little bit brutal, but
Yeah. This,
fantastic animal.
good. Glad you came.
The darker color is it would be the color of the pedestal. The pedestal would be the bubble. It's just
Another
one
color. Oh, this
exactly.
is the color of the pencil.
The
Oh,
dark,
the bubble.
the dark color is the main, it's completely, the bubble
Then
is a
how
dark
can
red.
this be white back in here? What's that?
That's from the acid process. When
Okay.
at the end when
okay.
they do the acid.
Okay.
Or
See,
as
that
well as the
confused me.
scava.
So then where they put the sand
Correct.
is the green part.
Correct.
And it's on the marver and they make all the lines and everything.
Johnny does the
on
drawings.
the marver.
Exactly. So it looks like when you see it, it's just fish. All you see are the colored fish, and then they roll the bubble over the fish so that the fish then, so that color that comes through is the background color.
I was
base.
explaining that I thought that it was a frit and that like the difference between this color and this color was the density of the frit on the
Correct,
marble.
correct. So there's barely any color there, so that background color is coming.
And then this is just
It's like
wiped
a
out.
paint. You said you're a painter, right?
Yeah.
So it's like a painting technique where
Mm-hmm.
the paint is more dense there,
Yeah.
but you're painting over you lay down a background color.
But then Yvonne was telling me that there's some kind of a painting mixture that actually gets painted on glass. And I was asking you guys about painting and you didn't tell me about that. So I wondered, is that about
that the-
flat glass and fusion? It's different than what you do when you blow?
Is she talking about just a technique in general,
Yeah.
or something that Bill does?
No, not Bill. She's
Okay, that's
because
it's enamel. It's enamel.
Okay.
It's a powdered glass similar to this, a different kind of powdered glass.
in a matrix of some sort of
Exactly.
carrier.
Exactly. And then you can brush it on. You can then scrape it off like
Okay, so
Sgraffito.
is that what would be on the drum over here?
No, that is also a sand
Frit.
drawing.
Or
Okay.
sand drawing.
Okay.
They don't
So
call it
Bill,
frit. They-
Bill doesn't do any painting on it.
It is the same thing, but Johnny calls it sand.
And you were saying this is a somewhat coarser. It's not powder, but it's a little bit coarser.
Right. It's slightly. It is. If you buy a bag of powder, it's microscopically just different, minutia of grains. So Johnny will sift through it to get the proper grain that he's looking for. So it's part of the powder, but it's not the super fine powder.
We do that when we do aquatints and intolerable printing. Sift through, and the degree of fineness is the degree of fineness that your aquatint's going to be. Because you're sifting rosin, and then you're going to melt it on the plate, and if it's coarse, you get big dots.
Exactly.
If it's real fine, you're going to
So
get fine
if
dots.
this is probably a bad, let's go over to this one, you can probably see it. So you can kind of see, maybe this isn't a great example, but some of these lines, if you look really closely, you can see just that's like a grain
Almost
right
broken.
there.
Yeah.
And because it gets blown, it actually stretches a little bit.
I see.
So that was even smaller, and as it blew, it got a little bit bigger. But that's basically the size of the sand that Johnny uses.
When I looked at this drum and that one, and I looked at these ends, can you tell me which end the blowpipe was on and on this end? Because we know that because
That's
of
the
this.
putty mark, but there's also a hole there.
But there's on the other side, and there's on this one over here, there's a nipple on the inside, which confused me. So I wanted to
This is just a cut mark.
Okay.
So the color being on the surface, when you cut it, it will leave a little bit of the clear that was underneath. It's hard to kind of explain, but that's a cut mark, and this is a punny mark. And it's something that I can tell very easily.
It's a
but it's hard
putty
to...
mark, but not the blowpipe mark. Is the putty comes
Correct.
in
This
from
was
the-
actually, this would have been, so if you think, okay, here's in terms of if I were to, this is filled with water, so I'm not going to do it, but the opening is up here.
Sure.
So it would be like this. So this is the bottom. He puts a hole in the bottom and puts a punty in.
Yeah.
And then when we transfer to here, this is open, so you have to close this end off. So in closing that and cutting that off, that leaves the cut mark.
I understand this, but why is the putty there? Why is not the blowpipe there, and then you put the putty on this end? That's what I'm missing something.
This, okay, so for
Unless
this
it was
technique,
transferred twice.
so it might have been. But I think this was the bottom at one point in time. This would have been, so here's on the blowpipe, they roll up the drawing,
Yeah.
and then this we have what we call a blow punty. So a punty is a thing that's just on a solid rod to hold on.
Yeah, okay.
So a blow punty is a punty on a blowpipe. So we put the hole there, put a blow punty.
I didn't know there was a putty on a blowpipe. I thought there were always two separate pipes.
No, there's a number of, and that's
Interesting.
in glass blowing. There's a A to B. There's sort of a formula, but for glass sculpting, especially with Bill does, it's just like you make it up as you go. So you can look at a lot of the traditional blown forms, and there's a formula. You know, okay, that's where the punty was, that's where this was, because there's just a few amount of steps that glass blowers use.
But this had a blowpipe,
Correct.
and then it had a punty after that,
Well,
or
the
in the same
blowpipe
type.
was the punty.
Oh, is it inside?
It's
I mean,
a
isn't
punty rod is just a solid rod, but a blowpipe is a tube.
Oh, yeah, but how can it be both at the same time? That's
So,
what I'm not getting.
It's if you take a blowpipe and you just get every piece starts with just a simple gather.
Yeah.
That's where you start.
Yeah.
So a blow punty is you just get that simple gather and you blow a bubble and you open up the end. So now you just have a tube with a blown. It's basically a collar.
Yeah.
So then we stick that on so that then you can blow through it. So when you close off the end, you're still able to blow inside the form before this is actually opened.
So on this one, is this where the blowpipe was?
So I can,
This is
all of my pieces have this exact same marking as well. If you were to pick them up and look at the bottom, there's the exact same little hole with the
Okay.
exact same honey.
Okay.
Because the figures are completely enclosed, so you can't close off a blown form, because in the heating process the air expands and the cooling and contracts. So if you were to have a closed form, when you put it in the annealer to cool down, it would create a vacuum. So you always need to have some kind of an air vent, the air doesn't
So So when I was able to use your figures to teach with, you use a puffer to push from the inside out to get the shoulders and the knees.
It's correct. It's a
Something like that.
specialized tool.
Yeah, but it comes up from inside or
Correct.
down from wherever end is open.
So this, in using this as an example, the bottom of my piece would be here, so I'd have it attached to the low punty. This would be open, and I would go in and I'd push out the shoulders, close it down, and then I'd put that up.
Can the head be made the previous day and just reheated?
Yeah.
And
That's how I usually
you
do it.
know your temperatures, it's just your own sensibility. That's the art of it.
Exactly.
There's no way to really measure. This is 500 degrees, this was 400, and we can't put them together because they're not the same. You just know that.
Right, and that's
the
comes with
art.
trial and error.
Yeah.
So I had to lose a bunch to figure out where it
Yeah.
needed to be.
Sure.
And that only comes with, and that was when I first met Bill. I had taken glass for a semester, and it's sort of one of those Zen things where somebody tells you and you don't understand it until
Yeah.
you get to that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
He said basically,
When you're ready
fir-
to learn, the teacher will come.
the first 20 years, for glass especially, the first 20 years of your career you make shit. And he said that to me because this is material. It's unlike any, you can't physically touch it. There's just the whole, it's so unique to what it is. It takes such long to master
It's
it.
like developing a vocabulary.
Right.
So that you can work with it without, so you can work with it without having to consciously think about technical stuff because you want to be thinking about aesthetic stuff.
And that's even, when that comes into, I mean, in the first few years it's learning about gravity and gathering all the temperatures and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then once you can figure out how it moves and how it works, which still takes years to do, it's like, okay, what do I do with it? And that's a whole nother.
So with this, we will go to the classic ribbon cutting ceremony and all that it means. And Mary, if you would,
Well, thank you. I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for coming and to thank Charlie and your board for your amazing vision and drive and for all that you've accomplished. And I do want to point out, in addition to all that you said, that during the year that, or however long it was that you were building, I think that the board made a concerted effort to keep it local. Richard Hobbs from the designer, Wellman and Zuck, I believe they have a presence on the island, and many local craftspeople were kept busy building plinths and columns and cases, and that is a big difference to our community, and we hope that that kind of relationship will go forward. Personally, I'm very much looking forward to all that the museum will mean for the education in the arts, the promotion of the arts, and just essentially a deep recognition of how important the arts are to our community that we all love. So I want to thank you for that. And oh, the building. How could I forget the building? And I wanted to mention, Richard, that I love this building. As mayor, I could not be more excited about how special this building is. Because I got to tell you, everybody in this town and everybody on this island has got an opinion.
Oh, yes.
And that's what art is meant to do. And I especially love that you repurposed a building that had real significance to our community, and that you didn't just encase it or scrape it, that there are elements of the old building still here that the community can recognize. And I gotta say, I think Frank Wilson would have really deeply appreciated that. It's full of life, it's full of energy, and that's what's really great about it. So thank you so much. And with no further ado, I've heard that these are artistic scissors, so they may not snip, but we'll give it a go. Charlie, why don't you come over here and let's get some photo ops here. Ready? Great.
Yeah.
Go.
That's it.
That is
Good job.
Let people go in.
We can go there. We can also go.